make of Mark Saber's assessment of the need for the government to wake up to the extent of infiltration, as he put it, by China of our political institutions?
I would say it's about 15 years too late.
So what do you think then? You think that there has been infiltration going on for quite some time?
So when I took over when I was made the first head of cybersecurity in the MoD, and I started asking around the question of cyber infiltration and the threats, it was quite clear that the biggest threat we faced at that time was infiltration, and also was about theft of intellectual property. And I was giving speeches about the Chinese stealing our technology and making British companies go out of business. And unfortunately, 10 years on, 15 years on, those headlines are still relevant because we have been woefully complacent about it. Or I suppose to put it more equably, we decided after the 2008 recession that we needed to become best friends with the Chinese to rebuild our economy. And I think we took all kinds of risks, and we said we were going to be their best friends, and we were blind, willfully blind to the threat that they posed.
Of course, the individual involved in this particular instance, Chris Cash, who's been named by the Times as this parliamentary researcher, has denied any wrongdoing, said he's completely innocent. But do you think that there are people actively infiltrating the sorts of organisations that he may have been involved in at Westminster in order to get information that could help the Chinese?
Of course. We do it to them, they'll do it to us. We need to go into this open-eyed and be absolutely clear that this is entirely consistent with the Chinese playbook for how they were going to dig themselves out of their century of depression, that the bad 100 years they had, and how they were going to reclaim their place at the top of the world tree. So it's all it's all there. They've written about this. The two colonels wrote after the first Gulf War a book called Unrestricted Warfare, in which they spoke about how they were going to overcome American dominance of the world. And it was everything apart from warfare. And what you're seeing now in terms of infiltration of our political system, what you see in terms of their theft of intellectual property, all these things are entirely consistent with what was written then. So nothing here should take us by surprise. The security people have been warning about this for years, but the economic argument about the advantage that the Chinese offer us has been played much more strongly, and has played much more strongly with government as well. So I think this is a healthy time to reflect that maybe we got our balance wrong, and to start taking the Chinese threat seriously.
So we've now had these suggestions from Oliver Dowden, the Deputy Prime Minister, that perhaps China could be formally designated as a potential risk under security laws, under the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme. Would this make a difference, or do you think that the government needs to take much tougher steps in order to remove Chinese influence from our infrastructure and to prevent people actually being able to get into Parliament to try to influence MPs?
Well, you would hope that the measures they have in mind are attempting something like that. But what we need to do is take a root and branch study of this, because we are indeed way behind the curve on this. If you just look at the BT system, when we are paying now, we're trying to play catch up now on decisions made years ago when the atmosphere was very different. When we looked to upgrade BT, it was thrown open to any competitors to come in and offer. The bid was won by Huawei. So Huawei were embedded in the bearer system of BT for years, and trying to dig it out of that is going to cost a lot of money, and we're never quite sure whether you've actually got them out. And that kind of naivety, I'm afraid, is something that at best takes years to get rid of, but you actually never really know, to my knowledge, whether you actually got rid of them completely. So we're playing catch up now in a big way. And so everything you suggest there, well, we need to take very seriously.
And what about the infiltration of our political systems, our political institutions? Is it frankly too easy at the moment for people to get a parliamentary pass where they can go and talk to all kinds of influential people? Does there need to be much stricter vetting of that?
So I can't comment about the details of the individual vetting, but all I can say is that there's been a naivety amongst our politicians, which has really appalled me. Shortly after I left the job as head of MoD Cyber in 2012, I think it was 2013 or 2014, there was a all-party parliamentary committee dinner hosted by the sponsors of the all-party parliamentary committee on information technology, and the sponsor for that dinner was Huawei. And that just shows how naive the people were. That Parliament allowed Huawei to be the sponsor for the all-party parliamentary committee on IT. And I was muttering about this to a friend of mine who invited me, and this Lib Dem peer, berated me for being critical of our generous hosts. And I said, "You do realise these people are thieving us blind?" And he said, "This is outrageously bad manners." And I'm afraid we're just taken for a ride by these guys, and our politicians have been incredibly naive. This politician in particular was equating the eavesdropping of British systems by the Americans with the eavesdropping by the Chinese. I said, "Are you morally equivalating the Americans and the Chinese?" And he was, I'm afraid, and I'm afraid that we've got people who are incredibly naive in our parliamentary system, and we need to just wise up. So personally, I'm delighted this guy's been caught. I'm delighted this guy has been hitting the headlines, and I'm delighted if this gives the absolute shock to our system that it needs.